the end. Otherwise, welcome to the SBDC, Small Business Development Center webinar. We are happy to have you. Today, I'm your guest speaker. I'm Peter Piconi. Today, we're going to talk about really pitching or just presenting is a better topic, or just how to talk about your small business. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. So give me 1 second. Okay. Can somebody raise your hand or nod your head if you can see that? Thank you, Judith. I appreciate it. Fantastic. All right. So today, a lot of you in this room look a lot like this bottle, right? You've got a message, but you're not sure how to get it out, right? And today we're going to talk about one of the things a lot of people in this room might fear the most, right? Even worse than death. The National Institute of Mental Health did a survey 10 years ago, and they asked people, what do you fear most? And guess what everyone said? More than death. They said, what do you fear more than death? And they said getting up and speaking in front of an audience, or just talking about themselves in an audience. So today we're going to go toward probably one of your greatest fears. For some of you, you're outgoing. It's no problem. But let's jump in that today. And I'm going to give you some easy steps today to get where you want to go. So just the mandatory SBDC, a little bit about the SBDC. This is a free service developed from funding. These are your tax dollars coming back to you, and it's Pitch 101, how to talk about your business. I'm an SBDC advisor. I work out of the office up on the coast. I'm in Rockland area, Camden, and I service the Waldo and Knox counties. The good news is when you get an SBDC advisor, you get not only that advisor, but the 14 other advisors behind him. So the team is huge. So I just want to shameless plug for that. We are sponsored by the SBA, so we'd like to thank them and our host enterprises, which is USM and CEI. So let's get in. What exactly does the Maine SBDC do, right? Really, we're free. We've talked about that. And we advise any business, small, medium, large, startups. We can help you. And really, in essence, we can answer just about any question you come to us, because if we don't know it, we're going to go to our network and we're going to help you find the answers. So we can do credit and financing, financial analysis, marketing and sales. We have a restaurant specialist on board that actually does this. So we do have subject matter experts on our team that are specialized. Like, for example, mine is in the marine sector. So that's a little about who we are, what we do. Now, what about me? Who am I? This is me, and knowing a little bit about me, that picture says all. That's I love to get out and use the outdoors. I have an ecotourism background with food and wine background also, but my persona is a glass half full mentality, and you'll feel that today. I'll be very energized. Everything's up on the upbeat, but I love to talk about business strategy with people. I like the phase where people are doing their ideation or in the early part of their startups. I can do the end part too, but I love that phase where I can get them before they go too far down the road. And then also, I love being a connector to resources. And you'll see that today, because you're going to get at least 4 or 5 different resources you can click on as part of this webinar. And I'm always chasing fish somewhere. So thank you. That's a little bit about who I am. If you do need advising or you want to do it, there's a slide at the end that you'll get, and you can actually scan this QR code and get advising. Do not scan this now, but you can scan it at the end. But I just want to tell you, this will come up for you. So let's get started. And today it's really about presenting. We're talking about your business, right? But what's the motivation for today, right? Why even show up? Why be in the room? Well, I want to start with a thank you, right? Because Thomas Edison once said this, and I like to study history. He said this. He said, most people miss opportunity because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. So I want to thank you for showing up today on your lunch hour and then doing some of your work with us, the Maine SBDC. So thank you, and come see us when you're ready. What I'd love to do is understand my audience a little bit better. Haven't had a chance to meet you. Everybody's on mute. So what I'd love to do is start out with what's called a word cloud. So everyone get out their iPhone or their phone. Make sure your phone's handy. So take a minute to find your phone. And what we're going to do is we're going to have you answer a poll in a question. And the question is write 2 or 3 words to describe how you feel about talking or pitching your business. Okay, so grab your phone. And on this next slide, you can scan this QR code. And when you, so go to your phone, go to your photos, pull up a photo, point your phone at this QR code, and then a little box will come up, right? When that box comes up, you can click on it and it'll take you to a survey and you're good to go. And I'm going to give us a few minutes to do this. So take your time, don't rush. But if you don't have a phone, don't worry, it's still going to work for you. But I'm going to share the results of this after we're done. But I'm going to take a few minutes for all of us to do this. Write 2 or 3 words to share how you feel about presenting or how you feel about talking about your business, or maybe just talking to, in general, talking in public. Because really that's part of what we're talking about today. Don't have to be big words. You can share 1 word if you want. Doesn't have to be 3 words, right? Very good. I'm assuming everybody got in there okay, but if you do have an issue or something, pop it in the chat. Jen can help you out a little bit there. I think we're good to go there. But I'm gonna jump out for just a second and we're gonna go to that screen. And I'm gonna share with you what's coming up. This is called the word cloud. Can everybody see that screen? Judith, thank you, Judith, for nodding your head. I can see you. That's great. So this tells us a little about our audience, right? This tells me a lot about you, right? And some of the words that show up the most are largest. So I know part of you are excited. Some of you might be a little bit nervous about doing this, right? They're unsure how to describe this, right? Some are comfortable in the public. That's great. Some are self-conscious, which makes sense, right? Some are not comfortable to pitch at all. And that makes total sense. And that's why you're here today, right? Some of you are curious. I'm psyched to see that. Some are hopeful. Some feel apprehensive or limited, right? I see confident in there. I'm happy to see that, right? And they're unsure how to describe. That's even better. Thank you for putting that in. So we're all over the board about, so thank you for doing the poll. I know a little bit more about you. Let's go back to the webinar. We're going to get started again. Okay. There was a email sent out this morning with a link to an article. Did anyone read that? Did anyone get a chance to read it? It was a really quick read, but Forbes is a really good resource for this. And Forbes brought up this article I found last year, and it was 13 tips for overcoming shyness in business settings. It's in that reminder that came out this morning, but you're going to see the link in here, so don't feel like you have, but I want to just briefly walk through that, right? And here's what they found, and they did some good sciencey research on that. What they found is one of the first things they wanted you to do was to know yourself first, right? Are you shy? Are you outgoing? But the key was be yourself, right? And some of you said that in the word cloud. You said, I'm already outgoing, or I'm confident, or I'm nervous, I'm not sure, right? So number 1, they said, be yourself in business settings. Number 2 is they said, write it down first. So you could do like, you could write down a basic pitch, right? Couple comments, and I'm going to show you how to do that later. So I'm going to show you a basic outline for that. So you'll have some tools, right? That's a good way to get more comfortable, or plan your comments out a lot like an outline. Go, hey, if I talk about my business, I'm going to kind of map them out so I have them kind of semi-memorized in my head. That works too. Another way to do this also, if you're in a setting, is to advocate for others first. And that might sound like, hey, I wonder if consumers would want a better cup of coffee, right? See how you're advocating for somebody else? That's almost in the form of a question. Or I wonder if people would want something that served their needs better. Say you're advocating for someone else. Sometimes that's more comfortable because it's not about you. It's about somebody else. And then you can frame the ideas in the form of a question. That also works. And I already showed you what that looks like, right? Hey, I wonder if people would want a better cup of coffee in Camden. Maybe I'll start a coffee shop. Well, that would work too. Just waiting for my screen cloud to catch up. But let me go with the roadmap for today. Where are we going? What are we going to do? What are we going to cover? I want to start there, right? And the roadmap is this, right? We're going to talk about very first the framework for the conversation. And we've delved into that a little bit. First, we're going to establish the framework for the conversation. Then we're going to talk about the audience a little bit and how to approach them. What do they look like? What do they do? How to type them. Then we're going to talk about the team a little bit, or maybe you don't have a team. Maybe it's just you. So that'll be a short conversation. And then we're going to talk about the problem you're solving for them and the solution all in one. And then maybe talk about the market fit, where you might fit, how that works. And then we're going to wrap up with some of the customers and how that works. All right. So now we have a rough track for where we're going. Let's first talk about the types of pitches that are out there, right? If you're pitching your business, there's actually 4 different types here. This is generally, but there's an elevator pitch, and some of you might know that the elevator pitch is a short, sweet, maybe 2-sentence thing you can knock out in 2 or 3 minutes or less. Like, hey, I'm Peter Piconi. I take people all over the world to do fly fishing in different destinations, and we provide a full service market for you. There's my elevator pitch, right? Then I let them ask questions after that. Another thing that occurs for people is sometimes what's called a pitch deck. And that might be where you're targeting investors. Some of you might have to talk to a bank. That's kind of like a pitch. And then you might have 10 or 12 slides and maybe 10 or 15 minutes to talk about your opportunity to investors. Think of the investors like a bank, right? And then there's the sales pitch. You already have had this. Maybe you've done it, right? You've walked into a shop and someone said, hey, how's it going? Have you seen the new skis from Nordic? Right? That's how it starts, right? Sales pitch can be short or long. And then there's a bonus here that I found out about on a website last year. Ginali.com is a blog, and they brought up something called a tweet pitch. And it's less common in Maine, but in other areas, people do a little pitch on a tweet, and it's just a couple of bullet points, and they do it that way. You'll be able to click on this link and go look for that if that's something you like to do. Tweeting's not as much as a thing here in Maine, so consider if that fits your market. Okay. The question is, for more of the framework, is how do we show up in this conversation? How do we do it? How do we dress? How do we show up, right? The key is be yourself. And that article called this out. Number 1, be yourself. So if you're shy, be shy. If you're outgoing and you're confident, be that way. But the key is let the pitch fit who you are. So no matter what I say today, these 2 things will override anything else. Some of it might be contradictory, and that's okay, but this is the framework for some of the work we're going to do today. One of the most important things that I want to focus on before we jump in is to tell your story. And think about it. All the things you remember are usually framed in a story. Before we had words and writing, before we had the Egyptian hieroglyphics, what did we have? We passed down our knowledge generation to generation by telling stories. That's right. When we were cavemen, we drew on the caves, but we told stories so people understood where the good food was, how to fight off a lion, right? So when you tell your story, you use anecdotes and personal experiences. So when you pitch, you're going to share not only your story, but you're going to make it personal. Some anecdote. And that makes it memorable. So there's 3 steps right there. The only thing I'm teaching you today is how to tell your story. And really to make it easy, I'm gonna give you a couple different steps on how to do that. I'm gonna break it down into the most basic format today. And by the end of the day, you'll have steps to do it. So that's your take home. That's what you'll get. Resources to click on, things to read. And then when you're done, you'll have a kind of a step-by-step process. We're pretty close. So when we're presenting, the audience is most important. So when you're pitching, depending on where you're at, let's say you walk into a room and you're having a drink and you're in a social setting, right? And someone says, what do you do? And there's 4 people. You want to look and see who's in front of you. So you want to see the target audience, right? So anytime we talk about pitching, we've got to know who's in the room first. And that's why I did that word cloud with you. I want to see who was in the room. On some basic level, I wanted to take the temperature of the room. So I did the same thing I'm going to teach you to do. So the key is know your audience. So your pitch might shift based on who you're speaking to, right? And the question is, what are they really looking for, right? If you go into the bank and you're asking for a loan, that audience is an investor, really, right? They're investing in you, right? Or if you're at a cocktail party and someone says, what do you do? That audience is now your customer, potentially, right? And that pitch could shift based on the audience. So first step, look at who's in front of you before anything comes out of your mouth. And then what's the end goal first? So we're going to work backwards. Yep. We're going to say, where do I want to go? Once we know where we're going, then I can help get you there, right? So what's the end goal when we're pitching or presenting, right? This is going to be a 3-sentence plan, super basic, right? And the 3-sentence plan looks like this. It's who, what, and why. Where and when might be in there, but it's who, what, and why. I'm going to do a sample pitch for your sample kind of how I talk about some of my businesses, right? I said, hey, I'm Peter Piconi. I live here in Camden and I take people all over the world, but I focus here in Maine to take people on fishing excursions, and we focus on bass and trout, and we do it primarily on the mid-coast because people love to see the outdoors, right? So I did who, said I'm Peter Piconi. I actually put in where, I said Camden, Maine, right? And what I did, I'm a fishing guy, right? And then why? Because people love outdoors, and Maine has a strong tradition of being an outdoor ecotourism based thing, right? One thing you can do with this 3-step plan, who, what, and why, where and when are in there, and you can decide if you want to add those or not. That's up to you. But you can role play with your friends, with your family. This is great with the wife, right? Or sometimes I just unveil it in a social setting and I see how it lands, right? So this is our simplest format. It can be more complex, but I don't want to do that to you today, right? The key is, what can you take home today and be able to do this in the next couple hours? So who, what, and why, and then add the where and when if you'd like. So part of the framework is, if we look at where we're going, like what is the value that you bring, right? Sometimes called the value proposition, right? What is the problem you're solving? What's the solution? And then what's your competitor? So really, what's the value proposition? For example, I used to work in the coffee industry quite a bit, right? Had 2 businesses that were similar there. And our value proposition was, we would fresh roast a bean. It comes directly to you. So our coffee not only is fresh, but it's locally sourced, and we roast it ourselves. So that was the value, right? This was in San Diego on the West Coast, right? So the problem I was solving for them was, they get fresh roasted coffee from organic growers. So from the source, right? And then I offered them the solution right there. That is the solution. And then part of the value proposition is, what's your competitive edge? Is like, hey, I fly over to South America and Africa every year, and we source from the smaller farmers, so they have a leg up. We purposely don't source from the big farms. We work with the smaller entry-level farmers so that there's a value add to their community. And that may not be competitive, but there's a social edge to that, right? So my value proposition around coffee was direct to consumer, fresh roasted. And then I was helping other communities far off because I was doing the work. Okay. This is a really short course that gives you how to pitch your business in 30 seconds or less. This is kind of some simple exercises for you to go to do it. But the key is make every word count. So not complex sentences, not big words. Avoid jargon or technical phrases. You want to make it so your sixth grader could do it. So simple sentences, right? So for me, one of my business was fly fishing. God, I'd say, hey, we take people out fishing on a fly rod and we target bass and trout in northern Maine. Short, to the point. I didn't even say fly fishing, right? I kept it really simple. Right. So I didn't say we're an ecotourism based model that caters to people from in and outside of Maine. I didn't go into that long one, 30 seconds or less. Super simple. Right. But you want to leave them with a picture they can remember. Right. So when I said northern Maine, as soon as I said Maine, there's a picture that goes in there. Right. But I could have said we target the local lakes that don't see a lot of traffic, that are pristine. When I throw those words in, an image pops into their head, right? Pristine, local lakes, right? They're putting themselves in there. So it gives them an image they can remember. And the key is if you're pitching in 30 seconds or less or talking about it, make sure you know who's in front of you. Sometimes it's hard to, and because you've just met them off the street or you're at a party or something and you're not sure. So I typically make it really simple and then I let the consumer ask questions, right? You can be a showman if you like, right? You can elaborate, you can vary your voice, but pitch confidently and short and sweet, really. So the take home here, paint a picture and keep it simple. All right? Because as soon as you give them a picture, that's great. And then you can use that anecdotal story in telling your story. When they ask the question like, hey, that's interesting. Tell me more about it. Where do you do it? Then you give them that story. Well, you know what? Let me tell you about the last time we went up to Aroostook County and we were targeting pike on the fly, right? We went in there by canoe and by kayak. See, I'm painting them a picture. We got up early in the morning. The sun was rising. We made a long cast and it was a huge blow up. That leaves a picture. So the picture might come secondarily. Remember telling your story. Now, the key is telling your story without losing their interest. And that's an important part of it, right? And you could absolutely lose someone. If you keep droning on and on without pausing to see if they even resonate with you, you'll know. So you want to read who's in the room. So the key is when you're telling your story, which is all you're doing, your story of your value proposition, focus on the problem. Right? What problem do they solve? For me, I was solving a problem of people accessing the outdoors. So I went, wow, I take people fishing. That's what I do. I give them that experience that allows them to reconnect with nature. I didn't explicitly say that, but that ultimately is what they're getting, right? So focus on the problem, whatever the problem is. Like, hey, it's really hard to get a cup of coffee in Camden. I have a fresh roasting business and we're starting a shop next month. That focuses on the problem, right? And then who has the problem, right? Getting a little more granular, like, hey, when people come to Maine, they're never sure where to go to get a great cup of coffee, but I'm going to solve that, right? And I'm talking specifically about people in Camden, right? Who has the problem? Maybe it's everybody goes, people look at Maine and they want to do the outdoors, but they're not sure where to go to do fishing. So they come to me. And then obviously when you highlight the problem and who has it, then you give them your solution. Again, 3 steps, right? There's a problem. Who has the problem? And then you give them a solution. It's like, yeah, hey, here's what I do. I actually take people fishing because a lot of people come to Maine and they don't really know where to go. And there's not a lot of roads and it's hard to identify what's fishy, what's not. So I take them out and I help them navigate that, right? And then people use me because
Oh,
I've done
really?
this for 25 years. right? So I just told them, why me? Why not somebody else? Hey, I've been a fishing guide for most of my life, and I do this, right? So I give them the final catch is why me? Why me and not somebody else? And then finally, you can talk about how they can find you. Hey, make sure to check out my website, or I can be found online. If you Google Maine fly fishing, I'm going to come up, right? So this is the 4-step process. Problem, who has the problem, your solution, and then give them a reason why they want to shop with you and how they can get to you. That's closing the deal, right? So we actually just closed the whole deal right there. I want to give you tips too, because part of what you might do, and forgive me, the slide's out of order, but you get a little preview for that. But sometimes it's easier for people to write down what they're going to talk about or how they're going to do it. So I give 4 steps to writing about your small business, because you might have to do a website. You probably have one, right? So you want to write about it without sounding like a salesman, because everybody knows what that sounds like, and it's not good. Let's face it. So I'm going to give you 4 steps. Step 3 is already highlighted here. So thank you, my PowerPoint skills. But let's start with step 1. And step 1 is put the focus on the customer. So when you're writing about it, the focus comes from their perspective, not yours. What might that sound like? Have you ever wondered what it's like to fly fish in Maine? That's a total consumer perspective, right? Have you ever wondered where to get a great lobster dinner on the coast of Maine, right? That's from, because guess what? Every person that comes to Maine thinks about that, right? Have you ever wondered where to get the best cup of coffee on the North Coast, right? That's the customer, because let's face it, we all do it, right? So step 1, customer perspective, right from their perspective, right? Step 2 is be honest about the options. You ever wondered where to get the best lobster bake in Maine? And there's a lot of places. But one of the best places that we've seen is McLoon's in Mid-Coast or what have you, right? So I went to step 3 is write as if you're talking to your best friend, right? So we did that. Focus was on the customer. We're honest about the customer. He said, hey, you can get a lot of crazy good lobster meals, but we found that this has been the best spot time and time again. And see how I'm talking very casually, not using a lot of big words. I feel like I'm talking to 30 of my best friends in the room today, right? So frame it that way. Use the language that most people can access. And then finally, when you're writing down your pitch or you're writing for your website, think about what makes it unique, right? So based on the lobster meal metaphor, right? Yeah, there's a lot of places to go. We found one of the better places that seems to appeal to everybody is McLoon's on the North Coast, Mid-Coast in Maine. And that has a unique experience in the sense that it's waterfront. You can see the lobster boats as they bring out the lobster right next to the lobster shack, and they make one of the best blueberry bread puddings that we've ever tried. And these are all truthful things. One of my favorite spots for getting lobster on the Mid-Coast is McLoon's, and they make a great blueberry bread pudding. So note to self, but there's 4 steps for you. So there's another way to write your pitch. Bonus step is offer a solution, right? Don't offer a problem, offer a solution to what they're doing. And that will help. So don't offer a product, offer a solution. Hey, go here, go there. I want to circle back to audience just for a second here, because the audience is super important, super important. Because some of you might be talking to a bank, maybe a loan for your thing, right? So, or if you're not talking to a bank, your audience will have likes and dislikes, right? Like if you're standing in front of someone and it's obvious they're more outdoorsy, they're probably less of that blue collar, or they're more of the blue collar crowd, maybe not so much the white collar crowd, right? But see if you can understand their likes and dislikes. hey, do you eat seafood? Are you allergic to it? That'd be good to know, right? And then see if there's a demographic in the room. Are the people in front of you or the people you're talking to male or female? Right? And then how do you approach males differently than females? Think about that one. And then what demographic do they fit? Are they 18 to 30? Are they millennials, right? Are they my kids? I have two kids, right? Are they 30 to 45, Gen Xers, Gen Yers, or are they 55 plus? Are they boomers? Because those are three different techniques for me, very different, right? And then consider market research or resources. Like go see your SBDC advisor going, hey, I'm not sure in my market. How do I market, find out who they are and how to market to them? Come see us. We can help you with that. We can actually do free market research and have access to market research studies in several industries, not everything, but several that will probably help your business move forward. So a little bit of tips for presenting, right? One thing you can do is join a group. That's really easy. There is a group nationally known. It's called Toastmasters. There's one in almost every town, believe it or not, even the smaller towns. I know there's one here in Camden because my son joined it for a couple months just to try it out. Toastmasters is great. Go to toastmasters.com, Google it, you get to it. Rotary is another good option. Rotary is a business professionals place where people go and they do it for networking, but Rotary will let you speak in front of the group. They'll let you come up and just talk about who you are and what you do because they're mostly business owners and they want to know who's in the sector. What do you do? Maybe your business can help their business. So consider that. If you do network with your local chamber of commerce, that's a huge resource. Some are better than others. What I found, but the Chamber of Commerce has not only marketing plans, but sometimes they have monthly meetups and you can come kind of do a 5-minute presentation on your business at one of their meetups. They like to see new people. They like to hear from local businesses, right? So that's another great place to practice. I recommend touching base with your local chamber. Great resource. And then if you do hit a cocktail powder now and then, or you're at the bar or you're at a coffee shop, you can test it on your friends. This can be a really fun way to do it, or sometimes brutal, because your friends will be brutally honest with you, right? So be aware if you step into that space, they may not have a filter on. So you might want to try it out with somebody easier to start. And somebody easier might be your SBDC advisor, or maybe your parents, but somebody that is probably going to be more welcoming and more willing to let you work through what you're doing, right? And I have certain clients that only book me just to practice their pitch and then they move on. I'm happy to do it. Shorter meetings, of course. But finishing up today, I want to tell you about some tools and resources at the top of this. And again, you will get this presentation sent to you in a PDF format. So you'll be able to click on all these links, but there's a link for the SBDC here. You can go and there's all sorts of marketing resources there. Go to our resources tab on the top right, click on it. There's a drop down menu. It's going to have all sorts of great resources for marketing in addition to other things. There's startup business checklists. So good stuff. Score does do a good resource that I found here. It's called Talking About Your Business for Anyone. This is another good resource just to get a different perspective, right? I found this website last year called ClickX, right? And it's writing about your small business without sounding like a salesman. We've talked about it. Realize if you go to some of these websites, they're going to want you to sign up for their content. So be aware of that. But this website had a couple neat things that I found to be pretty good and short and sweet, but they will market to you. And then also Fundbox was another website, which gave 10 public speaking tips for small business owners. I found this really relevant. It was simple. And these are all things you can do in less than 10 minutes. They're all short, easy reads. And then again, you can always sign up for one-on-one advising for what you do. One thing that I neglected to mention that I want to point out is anytime you're going to bring an idea to somebody, we've always found that the litmus test to see if it's going to work is to find a 10 or a 12-year-old and literally pitch it to them. And if that 10 or 12-year-old child can understand you and have a couple good questions, you're great. But if they don't get it or they turn and walk away, you probably need to make it simpler, right? And I do this with my kids. So when they were 10, 12, and 13, and I was a teaching instructor for fly fishing or other parts of my work, right? I actually used them as my target audience. And I said, hey, if I show this, does this make sense? And they would tell me right away. It was brutal. They're like, no, Pop, I don't get it. Right. So knowing that, that's a really good place to start. So if you have friends that have kids or have access to someone in that kind of 12 to 14-year-old age group, that can be a really good way, because if you can pitch it to them and they get it, it can work for anyone else, any demographic, whether someone has a PhD, a master's, or a high school education. It's a very good litmus test. So I want to thank you for being present today. And I'd love to open it up to questions as we do this. I'm sure it looks like there's some in the chat, but I'm going to leave this up. So if somebody wants to book advising, they can do that. But feel free to, looks like I'm going through the chat box right now. Some of you weren't able to get into the room, but you put it in the meeting chat. So thank you. A lot of self-doubt there. Some are confident and very eager, right? But I'm happy. Feel free to unmute yourself and just jump in if you have a question. Super. Sounds like it sounds like I did my job. Right? It sounds like it's all. You can nod if somebody wants to nod, that's helpful. But I'm curious to know. And if somebody wants to share, that's great. I'm curious, has anyone done anything with their local chamber of commerce where they kind of pitch their business, or with the Rotary? Has anyone ever done that? Feel free to unmute or just type something in the box.
I actually joined my local Chamber of Commerce, and going to the monthly meetings and having to talk about my business really has been a great experience. And I actually picked up a lot of customers by doing that and kind of getting outside of my comfort zone. And one of the things that I've learned to do is, whenever they're having events, offer to do something for their raffle, because then your business gets acknowledged, and you always get put on the spot and kind of have to give a little blurb about your business. But that's been a great experience for me.
That's good to know. And I found them to be great resources, and they're all not created equal. So some of them have opportunities, and some of them you might have to bring up the opportunity going, hey, is there an event you guys do where I can come talk? And they may not, they're like, oh, that's a great idea, right? So I always take that opportunity. Any networking, believe it or not, one time my parish asked me to come in and just talk about my business advising to the parish, right? And it was after church donuts, and I just sat around with a small group and I said, hey, I'm a free resource for what we do. So there's other venues for you to just practice or tell people about your business besides the ones I've mentioned. So don't feel like those are the only ones, right? There might be trade organizations, right? So if you're a guide, there's probably a yearly meeting for guides get together. You know, maybe pitch that way. It's kind of speaking to the audience. Or maybe there's a trade show where you can get up and do this, right? So look at trade shows. Jamie, I'm not sure if you had a question or not, but feel free to pipe in.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Playing with my thing. Like, other times, like when you're filling out a grant application, they tell you to pitch your business on camera, and I at least 10 takes before I can actually feel comfortable with it. One that I want to see. So, what would you suggest be about pitching on camera?
That is, Jamie, I've had to do that. That's one of the hardest things I've ever done, just so you know. it is because you can't always see the audience, right? Sometimes they're muted or they're off camera, so it's hard to read the room. So you talked about something that's a good way to do it is to literally practice it on Zoom beforehand. Maybe do it for a couple friends, have them get on, and then that requires not only kind of your content to be written down next to you, or that requires you to have something that's pretty solid, right? But I'm glad you brought that up because that does happen for grants, right? They want you to come in and talk about your thing, but think about it this way. You're just telling your story. So if someone does ask you to do that as part of the grant, think about what I spoke about when we first started. All I'm doing is helping you tell your story with a couple steps in there. So as long as you tell your story, it's going to resonate and you're going to be who you are, right? And I usually start with a story. Like today, I started with a metric. I said the National Institute of Health says that people fear public speaking more than death, right? I started with a metric. That's a really good way to start. That's a form of a story. I'm telling a story about something everyone has a hard time doing. So, hey, TJ.
Oh, yeah, I think I can do it.
Jamie, so I hope that answered your question, but feel free to use an advisor for that. Or some people come to me because I like this part of the job. So feel free to book me, Jamie, for a one-on-one on Zoom, and I can give you feedback. But I will ask you to kind of send me kind of a template or a format or an outline before you do it so I can understand where you're going.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Super. And then,
Hey, Peter.
Hey, how are you?
I am well, thank you. Good job. Thank you very much for being here for us. I got a question for you. I'm 62 years old. Going into a pitch, I'm very comfortable doing it, very confident doing it, very eager to go ahead and do pitches. My concern is how does a young audience, like we have to know our target market, we have to know our age group, we have to know male, female. How do the people look at it when a pitch is coming from an older person versus a 32-year-old person?
Mm-hmm. DJ, this is a great question, right? So let me make sure that I understand the question correctly. Just so let me give that back to you. So you're saying when I'm pitching and I'm 62, how does my audience see me differently versus someone that's 32? Did I get that?
Exactly.
Okay. Hey, what's the industry, TJ? Is it marine based? Is it fishing? Is it retail? What is it?
It's retail. It's
Retail.
wild space design. We're actually wall designers.
Okay, thank you. So right away, right? And this is, people make judgments right away. We all do it every day. We make an assessment of as soon as someone walks up, how you're dressed is important, believe it or not. So make sure it looks, you have show up jeans and a t-shirt, that's a low, they're going to make an impression right away, right? So show up looking more modern, that'll give you a younger feel. But right away, when we see boomers in the audience, and I'm part of that group a little bit, when we see that, we expect them to be less familiar with technology. Number one, we expect that. Not always the case. So if you show people that you're familiar with technology and have a QR code, like I showed you guys right away that I was familiar with technology and I had to do a poll, right? So right away you think, wow, I felt younger, even though I'm 54, right? So show them right away that that you're comfortable in that environment, number one. And then call it out if you want. Say, hey, I may be 62, but I want to tell you, I feel like I'm 40. So a lot of times go right at it, right? And so what do I know about my sector? What can a 62-year-old know about? Well, I've got 30 years experience, and that's part of the value I bring, right? So you can emphasize that value. Your value proposition could be your age, right? I've seen and done it all. I've seen so much already. So when you come to us, we're going to have the answers before you even know what the question is, right? So I tend to utilize anything where like there's an age bias or some sort of age perspective. I play it off as a strength because it is, right? Unless you're 62 and trying to lift heavy objects, that might be an issue, right? But play into younger demographics can be a challenge. So you have to build confidence there. And part of that confidence is identifying where technology is part of your business, identifying your website and having it look modern is really good. Because most websites that I see of people that are older, they build them 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and then leave them. They never change them. There's no video on them. There's no quotes. There's no personal links, right? So make sure if you want to kind of work against the age bias, make sure your perception and your marketing looks young. Maybe have somebody look at your marketing for you, right? And then TJ, I'm happy to work with you too. If you want to chat with me or pitch with me offline a little bit, I'm happy to go deeper into this because this is probably more specific to your business, but that's part of the way I might look at it.
Thank you very much, Peter.
All right, super. Actually, that's a great question. So that's a really specific question. And let's face it, Maine has a lot of business owners that are north of 60. All right, super. I really want to thank all the people that showed up here today. I'm glad some of the content was helpful to you.